Mortal Kombat 1 on the Nintendo Switch has had its fair share of problems. We're now going on 7 months since the game released, and so for today's video I figured we would take a look at some of the week 1 reviews, like from IGN and other websites that reviewed the game in the first week that it was out, and we're gonna see how the game compares to those initial reviews now 7 months later, so now that we're on patch 1.13. But before we begin, the like button is feeling kinda lonely and would like some attention, so be a dear and hit that real quick. I've got a link to my Discord in the description, so if you're somebody who owns MK1 or other fighting games on the Nintendo Switch, go check that out. Now let's get on to the video.
Let's get the most obvious knock against it out of the way first. It looks abysmal compared to the other versions. Character models lack detailed textures, the expressive facial animations of the current gen versions are highly compromised to say the least, clothing, and sometimes even skin constantly stretches and clips through body parts, and every so often you can see straight through them.
So he starts off by saying that character models lack detailed textures and that it's visually inferior to the other versions. Well, yeah, let's get into it. As you can see here, I've got the IGN footage, which was from the week 1 version of the game, and my footage, which is in the current 1.13 update. There has actually been a lot of improvement to the visuals. The colors pop a lot more now, and it's somewhat more pleasing to the eye. It's not perfect, you know, it's not Steam quality, but it's a lot better than what it was in the first week. We can see how much more washed out and muddy the older version looks compared to the new version. It's a lot clearer, and the textures actually load a lot faster now than they used to. It's night and day pretty much, so it has seen a huge jump in quality. But as far as the facial expressions, I don't think, and this is just my opinion, I could be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that we're going to be seeing those make it to the Switch version. I'm referring to the facial expressions, you know, the super detailed facial expressions that you see on the Steam, PS5, and the other versions of the game that they're not on the Switch. I don't think they're going to be making it to the Switch. They are present in some areas, like in fatalities, but not in most, and I honestly, for me, it's not the biggest deal, but that's just me though. The clothes stretching thing that he's referring to here has undergone a bit of an evolution on the Switch. It was all over the place in the first few versions of the game, but then they fixed it. In patch 1.12, the clothes stretching problem came back, but now it's fixed again in patch 1.13. So I guess that issue is gone for now. It might come back later, but at least for now it's gone. Clothing clipping does sometimes still occur, but it's pretty rare.
Those absolutely gorgeous stages that I praised in my other review looked like they had a heavy Gaussian blur filter applied to them in Photoshop, and briefly made me think that I needed glasses.
Okay, so the stage he's talking about here is Hanging Gardens, and it was really rough on the Nintendo Switch, but as of patch 1.13, it actually has seen a pretty big bump in visual quality. It's no longer as blurry or washed out as it was before. You can really see the difference in this side by side. And again, of course, it doesn't compare to the other versions, but you know, can you really expect it to? The Switch was outdated in 2017 when it launched, so to expect it to keep up with current gen hardware is pretty crazy. Now this stage is Sundo, and it has seen some major changes as well. We can see moving characters in the background. That was not a thing in week 1. It goes a long way to making the stage feel more lively. Also, it's not as washed out or muddy as it was before. We could also say the same thing about the tea house stage. Pretty much everything having to do with the stages seems to have gotten a big visual upgrade in patch 1.13.
If this was the worst of Mortal Kombat 1's problems, I'd still be able to recommend it because even though it would look bad, it would still play great. But the issues go far deeper than just skin. Before you even get into a match, you've got to deal with egregious load times lasting on average about 40 seconds.
And the thing about the load times lasting 40 seconds, that was actually true, and to be honest, I never thought that that's something that was going to be fixed. For the first few patches, load times took 40 seconds to load the first match in a casual match. A few patches later though, the load times actually got worse. They increased to 60-second loading times. I got a video where I'm breaking that down a few months ago, but with patch 1.9, they finally kind of resolved it. Load times for casual matches now only take about 17 seconds, whereas before they took 40 seconds and then 60 seconds. Now they take 17 seconds. I did a comparison video between MK1 and MK11, the Switch version specifically, and MK1 actually has faster loading times now in some areas. Rematches do take longer to load though, on average about 25 seconds to load a rematch, which does not make sense, but hey, who knows, hopefully they get that fixed. Still though, 25 seconds is a far cry from 60-second loading times and even from 45 seconds loading times. One thing about that though is that for casual mode, they did remove the dialogue intros, so after you and your opponent are done picking your characters, cameos, and the stage, you're not going to see the characters clash and talk to each other. It's going to cut to a black loading screen, and when it's done, about 17 seconds later, the stage intros will start. The dialogue intros where the characters talk are still in the game though, but they can only be found in Combat League, Towers, and boss fights in Invasions mode. I think the reason that they were removed was to help along with the loading times, and clearly it worked, at least for casual mode, and we're gonna go into Combat League later, the loading times for Combat League.
Invasions is particularly bad because it's designed for a ton of quick bouts that you're able to generally steamroll through in order to collect rewards like new gear pieces, skins, etc. At its best, it's already pretty grindy and slow paced, but when you add on the fact that you're frequently spending more time waiting to get in and out of a fight than you are actually fighting, it becomes straight up joyless.
The loading times for matches in Invasions mode have been cut down for sure, but they're still pretty egregious. Invasions mode in general is horrible in every version of the game, but the Switch version was particularly bad when it launched. It was very slow, everything moved in slow motion, and I do mean everything. Textures took a long time to load, and on top of that, the load times were really bad. Like I said, load times were improved a bit, but when you consider the sort of game mode that Invasions is supposed to be, it's supposed to be very snappy. You go in and out of matches and you play a whole bunch of matches. These load times are still too much, but I can say that in every other category of performance, Invasions mode on the Switch has improved a great deal. It's no longer super slow or choppy like it was in the first couple of patches. Visually, the stages look noticeably nicer in Invasions than they did before, and textures load way faster now. That goes for characters too.
Ranked online play is especially frustrating because of the fact that every match is a first to 3 set, and despite playing with the same characters on the same stage with the same cameos, it still takes about 40 seconds of staring at a black screen in between each match of the set.
Now he mentions ranked matches, so that's Combat League. Remember when I said casual matches load a lot faster than they did before? That's true, but for Combat League, not so much. Combat League matches do take longer to load than casual matches. I've had KL matches even in patch 1.13 that take north of 40 seconds, close to 50 seconds to load. If you're used to it like I am, it really isn't so bad, but I really do hope that they find a way to reduce these load times without eliminating the dialogue intros. Fatalities did used to take a while to start up, but that's been mostly ironed out, although fatalities still can go pretty slowly sometimes. Like they'll move along in slow motion. Who knows if that's ever gonna be fixed? Even to this day, crushing blows, fatal blows, and intros in the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 11 still go in slow motion, so who knows.
The real kicker is the actual performance of gameplay during a fight. There's a lot of slowdown that affected my timing and led to drop combos, similar to how it would feel if I was playing online with bad netcode. Only this was playing locally against the CPU.
Now let's get to a lot of people would consider to be a game killer, the performance. In this IGN review, which I remind you is from the first week of the game's release on the Switch, the reviewer says that there was a ton of slowdown that affected his timing for combos and things like that, and not just in online, but against the bots in local matches. Well, as far as slowdown in local matches, that's not a thing anymore. In fact, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think it ever really was in my experience, but then again, You know, I didn't usually play against bots in local matches. Maybe he's talking about in the pre-patch version, like the pre-day 1 patch. Maybe that's the version he was reviewing. Now, if we're talking about invasions mode, then yeah, fights against bots in invasions mode did have severe slowdowns, but that was fixed patches ago, at least when it comes to one-on-one fights against bots and invasions. When you start adding in things like the ambushes and things like that, where you have to fight multiple characters in a single fight, that can still slow down pretty hard. But in local versus mode, nah, that performs perfectly. As far as the online goes, in my experience, it never has been super horrible, but with each patch that gets released, performance in online matches does improve. And with patch 1.13, I really can't see how it can be improved that much more on the Switch. Like, to me, it already performs better than MK11 on the Switch does online. If you're fighting in a 200 ping match, then obviously it's gonna chug quite a bit. If we're in a 100 ping or below match, it's gonna be pretty smooth. That's in my experience. Try playing this online and then go to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The difference is night and day, dude. MK1 on the Switch performs very well online, and I'm someone who, at this point, I probably have somewhere north of 3,000 online matches played on the Switch version.
There's also a couple of weird bugs I encountered, such as Lee May's lantern disappearing after a certain amount of time in the air. Serena's dreaded boomerang cameo attack doesn't return, which makes it essentially useless.
Now he talks about bugs. The bugs that he's referring to here with Lee May's lantern and Serena's size not coming back, they were fixed a long time ago. He goes on to say in his final verdict that MK1 for the Switch should not have released in the state that it was released in, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. If MK1 had released on the Switch today, it would have a way better reputation, but the way that they released it, full of performance issues and slowdowns, really did a number on people's perceptions of the game on the Switch. Now, considering the other issues at play with Mortal Kombat 1 in general, not just as it relates to the Switch version, who knows what's gonna become of the game. Right now, Mortal Kombat 1 seems to be struggling to keep up with Mortal Kombat 11 on Steam. It barely has more players than the old game, and sometimes it has less. The same seems to be going on in the Switch version. When I go into Mortal Kombat 1 on my Switch, I'm having trouble finding matches. And when I go into Mortal Kombat 11 on the Switch, I can find matches at about the same rate. And that's the old game, okay? So things really are not looking good for Mortal Kombat 1, and I do hope they turn it around. We'll go more in depth on this in another video, but for today, that's gonna be it. I'm gonna keep bringing you more combo videos, online matches, and video game news. I'm Switchblade, done.